So participle clauses, and here we have our first example. Singing loudly, Phil ran down the road. So what is a participle clause? Well, this is your clause, and this is your participle, the verb in the ing or the past form, the ed or the irregular past form. So what we have here is what's called the implied subject. So I'll write that here, implied subject. That is, this doesn't look like a clause because it doesn't have a subject, but in fact, Phil is your subject. So what we see in a fairly standard participle clause is the participle, and then perhaps an adverb, and then a subject that starts the next clause. This subject will be the same subject of this verb. So that's why we say implied subject. We don't explicitly state the subject. Let's look at another example of what we shouldn't do. So singing loudly, I watched Phil run down the road. This is incorrect because what we would expect here is that this subject here would be the same subject of this clause given the implied subject. So it would have to be I was singing loudly as I watched Phil run down the road, which is not what we mean. We mean that Phil was singing loudly. Not wanting to upset Phil, I told him I liked his singing. So here it works. We have the not wanting, and who did the not wanting? I. So I didn't want to upset Phil. So this works well. The point here is that we have not. And what I'm indicating here is that not needs to go in front of the participle. So if you want to negate, put not in front. Stepping into the pub, we noticed an awful smell. What I'm showing here is that we are looking at two things happening at approximately the same time, or one just after the other. So we step into the pub and we notice an awful smell pretty much at the same time. Notice that we are doing the stepping here as well. So same time or one just after the other. Living off a particular kind of eucalyptus leaf, koalas are very limited in their choice of habitat. In this case, what we're doing with the participle here, and it's a phrasal verb in the participle form, present participle form, we are giving background information, or we're saying why koalas are limited in their choice of habits. So you could think of this clause as giving background information, or this clause is saying because or why koalas are limited. Moving to the next example. Knowing that she would appreciate it, I bought Wendy a bunch of flowers. Again, we have the I that did the knowing. I knew she would appreciate it. And here we're just saying the reason. So this is because. Because she would appreciate it, I bought the flowers. Built of concrete and steel, these structures can withstand even the worst weather. What we've actually got here is a description of the structures. So the structures are actually not the subject of this clause, but we are using built here. So this is the past participle of build. So that one doesn't actually have the subject. I guess in a way this one would be considered passive. In a way, not exactly. Given the chance, she would have stolen everything in the house. Again, we're using the past participle here, just as above. But this one is actually a conditional, and it is if she had been given the chance. Now, it's also passive because we don't state who was giving the chance here. So it's passive, so we don't have this implied subject. So what's worth noting here is when you have a passive structure here, you will take the past participle. Having congratulated my opponent on his victory, I went over to the bar and ordered a drink. Now what we're trying to show you here is that one thing was completed before another. So you congratulated your opponent and then you went to the bar and ordered a drink. And the other thing we're trying to show is that you do this with having. So the having takes the past participle, and this, the present participle ing, and this one takes the past participle. It's essentially the perfect tense in the participle form. So Let's look at a slightly different form. Having been congratulated by my opponent, I went on stage and gave a speech. So you can see that this might be the same situation with two separate speakers, the one that did the congratulating and the one that was congratulated, which shows you that this one is actually passive. So the one below here is passive, and you can tell that it's passive from this been. So having been congratulated by my opponent, I went up on stage and gave a speech. So we don't have the I here because this is actually not the subject. It's not the implied subject of this clause. And then we move to the next one. And I just should go back and point out that we're using the having. That's what I'm trying to show here, of showing that one thing happened after another. So in this example that I've just shown here, we have eating a box of donuts, I began to feel ill, and having eaten a box of donuts, I began to feel ill. So just like above, this time we have used the perfect tense again, or having. Now this is a different use because eating a box of donuts, I began to feel ill. When we have just the participle, it means at the same time, or that the eating was unfinished. When we say having eaten a box of donuts, we actually mean that this has finished, and then you began to feel ill. So not finished and finished. And looking now at a slightly different part of participle clauses, we see how they're used with conjunctions and prepositions. And when we do use conjunctions and prepositions, we use the present, the ing participle. So here's a few examples of conjunctions and a few examples of prepositions. There are others, of course, that you can use. Before leaving, lock all the doors. So here we've used before, and of course we had to take the ing with a conjunction in front of it, and this is then imperative. That's why there's no subject here, but we could have put the subject in. Before you leave, you need to lock all the doors. On receiving $1,000 from you, I will consider your debts cleared. And here we have the preposition. This is actually also conditional, and that is why we've got the will here. This is the first conditional as well. So just a couple of examples with conjunctions and prepositions, and all you need to note here is that they need the ing when you use one of them. Okay, and that's all.